with no further ado, I will introduce tonight Sue Bell, who's our host. So Sue has a background in journalism, but is most known in our space for being the founder of the Launceston Freelance Festival. If you're a freelancer, this is also the person to speak to. Heaps of other, you've probably read the bio on the event, so I won't go into that. And Kirsty. So Kirsty, thank you very much, both of you guys, and particularly Kirsty for being here tonight. And I won't delve into Kirsty because we're going to hear all about her. So if we can just give her a warm welcome.
All right, welcome Kirsty.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone for coming along, especially given how chilly it is out there tonight.
Well, it's interesting having this fire here because I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but as soon as I walked in, I immediately felt warmer. Did anyone else feel like that? So, yeah, interesting. I haven't done one of these fireside chats, so what I just thought we'd do is I actually wrote a list of questions, and I was just glancing at them then, and I thought they're not in chronological order, so if we suddenly jump from one part to another, sorry about that. But basically, I guess I was observing you before, and you know a lot of you know
I've
Kirsty?
paid most of them to be
here.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Kirsty's story, so please jump in if she leaves something out, some juicy tale that we're not aware of that you can bring up about Kirsty's past. But basically, when I was reading about you and doing some research on you, I kept coming across that you were a self-made millionaire by 27, and I think it's interesting because when I think back at being 27, I wouldn't have had 2 cents to put together, and it's just amazing that you managed to reach that peak at such an early age, and that you didn't actually retire. You know, that you're actually still going. So what struck me was the backstory of you getting to that, and 27, like that's kind of a milestone in a way when you think 27, sort of just out of that sort of adolescent brain thing. And can you tell us a little bit about that journey up to being 27?
Yeah, so for me, that journey starts really, really young, like at 5 or 6 years old, and I actually spoke up in Devonport yesterday, and I took my 7-year-old with me, and so it was great. I had a prop to sort of say when I was this age, but I had really entrepreneurial parents. And the whole family was based around their entrepreneurial desires. So we all worked in whatever scheme or business or idea that my parents were doing at the time. So it was a laundromat one day, a petrol station the next day, a biscuit making business, a 1,000-year-old duck egg business, not our most successful venture, investment properties. It was all sorts of things. Like my mum and dad had normal jobs when I was very young, and then they quit these jobs to go out into the entrepreneurial space. And so I grew up in that environment of being around small business, and so I had ideas. Like at age 5 or 6, I threw my own birthday party thinking that was going to be a brilliant business plan to get everything that I wanted, and I invited my whole class, and then decided that wasn't thinking big enough, so I invited all the classes in my school. There were 4 classes. Every single kid got a handwritten invitation from me. And then the day of my party arrived, I was in my beautiful party dress waiting, doorbell rings. I open the door, and there's 2 of my friends holding presents with their parents behind them, and I was like, yes, this is working. And then my mum comes up behind me and is like, what's going on? Because it was October and my birthday's in March. And she had no idea about it. But like that's my whole childhood, like harebrained scheme after harebrained scheme. Just my brain was always ticking over in that respect, like from a really early age. So probably my most successful childhood venture was figuring out how to hook 2 VCRs together and make pirate copies of Back to the Future. Those went for a pretty penny at school, until the vice principal found out, and then we moved. But yeah, lots of different ideas like that. So I was always in that headspace just because of the way that I'd been raised. And then that was great. Like I wanted to be just like my parents. I wanted to have businesses and investment properties and be exactly like them, until my mid-teens, when things started to get really tough for my family. The way we ended up in Tassie was my parents actually retired down here in their 30s and didn't have to work anymore. And then things went fairly pear-shaped over the space of a couple of years. Some bad investment decisions, some bad people left running their businesses. Sorry, not bad people, some bad choices in terms of who they left running their businesses. And then in the space of what seemed like about 2 years, things went from being peachy. Like, we were never wealthy, but we were comfortable. We had a property out in Golden Valley, out the back of Deloraine, and that was Mum and Dad's happy spot. And things were fairly happy and comfortable. And then over a couple of years, things got really uncomfortable, really tense. Money became really, really tight. We moved a couple of times. That was kind of the story of my childhood. We used to move a lot. And we ended up in a little house in Mayfield. And I remember the day, like, our house got repossessed. Like, both my parents went individually bankrupt. We lost our family car. My parents went through a lot of financial stress, and I'm sure it wasn't the only thing, but in the space of that time, you know, their relationship degraded, they got divorced, both went individually bankrupt, and that was like a spark for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm now terrified of everything that my parents have done, and I don't want to be anything like them anymore. And so I went and got a job, and it's weird, I don't speak in Launceston very much, but to speak here, you'll know the places. So I got a job working at Peter Lee's Real Estate, because my mum worked there, and it seemed like they wanted to give me some money, so that seemed like a terrific idea. But then there were no real side benefits to working in real estate, so I got a job down at what is now the Wendy's at Kmart. It was Jojo's at the time. Many side benefits, like heaps of side benefits. On a Sunday, they'd clean out all the machines and you'd go home with tubs full of soft serve, and I can make a perfect soft serve and dip it into hot chocolate. That's a real life skill there. And I saved up money to buy a car. I was going to buy a Kombi, and then one day I walked into a jewellery shop and I fell in love with the jewellery that was on sale there, and instead of buying a Kombi, I struck a deal to wholesale the jewellery and started my first legitimate non-illegal business at age 15, and sort of got past this whole victim mentality I'd been running around with for a little bit of time at that stage because of what I'd seen my parents go through. I was terrified, and then I realised with a conversation with my mum, the night that I met the lady that sold this jewellery, I realised that I could be a victim to what had happened in my past and what I had seen happen with my parents, or I could see it as the greatest education anyone could have into what can go right with entrepreneurship and what can go wrong. And so then a couple of other legitimate businesses after that sort of led me to starting my own real estate agency with 2 business partners when I was 21, and it all sort of went on from there. So yeah, long-winded answer. Was this an interview or a monologue? Sorry.
Well, it was really interesting. I didn't want to interrupt. So at 21, you've started your real estate agency with 2 friends, or were they friends? Or
one was a colleague at the time. It's really interesting. The real pivotal moment, the reason I was involved in that real estate agency was because at 19 years of age, I went to Peter Lee's, who was the boss of the real estate agency I was working at. I'd unceremoniously dropped out of uni and was back working in real estate. And I said to him, I quite like this real estate thing. I like investment properties. I think I want to do this. How do I buy into the company? At 19, with no experience. And he was a very, very kind man to me, but he let me know in no uncertain terms that probably wasn't happening anytime soon. And never one to give up. I said, well, how about I get my manager's license then? And should we fund that 50-50? Or, would you like to fund more of it? And again, he let me know in no uncertain terms that there was probably no real need for me to get my manager's license at that stage.
So you're very persistent.
I'm quite persistent, yeah. But I don't know, if I look back now, I don't even know why I did it, but I went and got my manager's license on my own. I had no need for it. I've always had this thought that education in any respect, it can't be a bad thing. And so I just did it as a bit of a challenge to myself. And then after getting my manager's license, the top sales consultant in the company and his brother, Scott and Tony Morrison, Tony used to be the top sales consultant in the company, they came and approached me and said, we'd like to go out on our own. Would you like to join us? And
so they spotted something in you?
They spotted that manager's license in me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely. So that was the fact that I had it. It was. I mean,
so you didn't keep it quiet that you'd gone and
no,
done a license, right?
Everyone knew. Yeah. But it wasn't. I'm under no delusions that would have happened any other way other than me having that license. That was a real turning point for me, and it has sort of always been sticky in the back of my mind that if there's an opportunity to do further education, it can lead to some pretty awesome things.
Yeah, and you weren't put off. That's really interesting too, because a lot of people would be put off, especially someone in a senior position saying, no, don't worry about that, and you're only 19.
Yeah.
So so that shows,
He wasn't trying to hold me back. He just couldn't see why I needed it, and I can completely understand. Yeah, I probably didn't need it until I did.
Yeah.
And then the fact that I had it, completely changed the course of my life.
So this time, you're 21 when this has happened? Okay,
Yes.
so we've got 6 years for when you start this agency to when you become the multimillionaire in a legal business. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened over that 6 years?
Back to the Future,
yeah.
let me know.
What happened in those 6 years? Like,
we started fairly unexcitingly. All the things you would need to start a business we didn't have. So we operated out of a 2-bedroom apartment with no commercial zoning. We had no phone. Our website address was, our company at that stage was called M&M Real Estate. So our website, of course, was morrisonrealestateonline.com. And so we had to fix a few things like that. We tweaked a lot of stuff, and we really, really bootstrapped. Like, we spent next to nothing. We funded the company on 2 personal loans meant for cars. And now I work in finance. So, but we just were this like scrappy little upstart, and we started at a really fortunate time. So we started at the beginning of 2001, and in 2003, the market here doubled in a space of 12 months.
a bit like what's happening now.
Yeah, but quicker, much quicker. And it was over. This has been going on for about 2 years now. It was up and done much quicker than this. And for us, it was such a fortunate time to have gone into business. And yeah, we went from having the 3 of us working in this tiny little 2-bedroom apartment. We moved a bunch of times. And eventually, when I sold out of that company, there was about 50 people working for us. We'd been listed as the 24th fastest growing company in Australia. I'd won National Telstra Young Businesswoman of the Year. Youngest one ever to win that, so that's cool. That'll stay on the badge forever, because I think they've raised the age you can be in it now. So now there's older people going for it, so it's like great. I think I was 22 or 23 when I won that. And little things like that, I would say to any of the startups in the room, obviously winning something like that's fantastic, but it's not fantastic because it means that you're the best at anything. It means you're good at writing submissions, you can answer questions in an interview, and it gives you instant credibility. That was what that was for me, because I was 21, 22. I looked like a walking fetus. I was so young looking that it wasn't even funny. I wish I was still, looking young for my age, but then I really was. And so that gave me credibility that, and it also, I think the really beautiful thing about that for us was that, back in the days when if something was happening, it was covered in the Examiner, and, we got coverage in the Examiner because of it. And then it gave people in Launceston a reason to really want to support our business that was, aside from the fact that the 2 guys were amazing at their jobs, it was like, oh, there's that young girl and she's having a go. And people would stop me on the street. I remember someone stopped me in the street and said, "Are you real estate Kirsty?" I was like, well, yes, I am. It's the closest I've ever come to having a superhero name.
Yes.
But the Launceston community was amazing during that time. Like, you hear so much about tall poppy syndrome and those sorts of things, and I experienced completely the opposite.
So was money really important? You actually wanted to reach that benchmark?
At the time, when my parents lost everything, I'm really goal-driven and really list-driven. Like, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not working off a list. And so at the top of my list, it was going to be I was going to have all the money so that I could protect my family from everything that happened, and make sure that no one I loved ever went through anything like that ever again. And it's funny, there's a person sitting in the room actually who we almost didn't become friends, and we're very, very good friends now, because I feel like that intention around money, it must have been like eking through every pore at that time. I must have just seemed quite driven towards it. And that's one of the things, I was talking again with someone in the room tonight about how you grow up, and if people experience you over different years, your point of view changes, and my point of view has changed around that quite a lot. I guess at that time, the desire to have the money was driven a lot by fear, like just fear of people that I loved going through that kind of pain again. And now my thoughts around money are that it's important to figure out what's going to sort of happen if you have enough money so that you can sleep easy at night, have the freedom to be able to do what you want. I'm so lucky I get to work and pick up my kids, when I want to from school, go to any school event that I want to. That's the kind of freedom that I feel like is really important now, and it doesn't have a monetary figure around it, but at that time it absolutely did. Yeah.
So you continued to work. What was the motivation when you could have gone off overseas and done whatever you wanted?
I wish I had gone overseas a little bit more, actually. I'm a bit travel mad. My brain doesn't stop working. Like, I'm the person where if you tell me what your interest is, I'll be like, oh, you take great photographs, right? Here's what we can do around that, business. I can't turn it off. And I actually really like work. Like, I'm really fortunate. I get excited about Friday, but it's so I can catch up on my work over the weekend so that I'm ready for Monday. I really enjoy my work. So yeah, I don't know what I would do if I retired. I don't play golf, so
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What about so up loans? I guess is quite different from the real estate. So what got you involved with that side of things?
It's a lot more different than I thought it would be. Actually, I thought it would be heaps more similar. I thought I would have all these similarities that I could draw upon, and there are some. Like, you know, fundamentally running a business is very similar business to business, but the actual work's really, really different. But we started Up Loans. So after selling my first real estate agency, I was out for a couple of years and I did a bunch of different stuff. Started a children's clothing line where we donated one outfit for everyone that we sold, and we did donations in, I think, over 30 countries across the world. Made no money doing it, but had a heap of fun at the same time. I started a couple of online businesses, but then I was drawn back into the world of real estate. It's like a cult. You can't really escape it. And
you enjoyed it too. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so myself and two business partners started up Elephant Property. We had a little boutique property management company, and I did that for 6 years. And then right at the end of it, I would find myself coming to work, and I'd been 20 years in real estate at that stage. I found myself coming to work and getting excited when things went wrong. I would be like, that's a gnarly problem, let's get stuck into fixing that. And it made me realise that I wasn't being challenged in that anymore. I'd done it for so long, and the business was ticking along beautifully, and the team knew what they were doing, that I don't know, it wasn't a good space to go to be excited about problems when they cropped up. So I thought, how can I challenge myself? And I'd had a mortgage broking experience that was different to how I would have done it, definitely. And again, I just can't turn my brain off. So things just started ticking over in my head. I was like, what if they did this, and how about this and this? And then suddenly I'm going and getting qualified, and one of the other girls that we had in our team there also thought she'd get qualified at the same time, and we thought we'd do it in addition to our real estate agency. And then 6 weeks after becoming qualified, we got an offer to buy our rent roll that was too good to turn down, and suddenly 6 weeks into a brand new industry, we were mortgage brokers full time. And it was like, wow, okay, it's a good thing I exactly know what I'm doing. And then it turns out we didn't. It was like the steepest learning curve of my entire life. And a lot of those early clients that I dealt with were friends. I'm very appreciative to them for bearing with me, because I said to them, no one will work harder for you, but I might be slow. I'm going to be slow because I'm going to ask questions, so many questions. And just in asking those questions, we figured out what we were doing. We had really good mentors. And it's been amazing. And the good thing about broking is that every day is different. You know, even just the 3 clients I saw before coming here tonight, everyone's different. Everyone has their own intricacies, and there's a lot of challenge in it.
So it seems that you've started up businesses often with friends or people who are, you know, colleagues who are become friends, and they often say don't
I
start.
get lonely.
Well, they say there's all that adage about never doing business with friends and family, but you seem to have managed to do that and remain friends with people. And
there's been
the
tough
secret
times.
there?
No, there's been really tough times, and there have been some friendships lost. And I've had numerous partnerships. You know, we've had real estate agencies in Hobart and up in the northwest in Longford, and there's been some that haven't worked out very well, unfortunately. And there have been some friendships lost, so I can totally understand that sort of mentality of not going into business with friends. I'm just really fortunate that I have a lot of friends that are extremely awesome and like to do the same sorts of things as me. So I've kind of, even when I've had bad experiences, I've just tried to learn from them and not make the same mistakes again. And I'll freely admit that a lot of the mistakes that were made were mine. Especially, I mean, even I told a story yesterday, but when we were in one of the original moves for our real estate agency, we moved from our 2-bedroom office, which was in a 2-bedroom apartment with no commercial zoning. We moved out to Tamar River Villas, which is a little motel right near the tail race, 31 rooms, and I, with no experience whatsoever, moved in as the night manager because we'd sold the whole complex and now someone needed to look after it. So I lived there for about a year, and I inherited my first staff. I think there were about 4 housemaids that worked for us there. And I micromanaged them until all of them quit within the first 2 weeks. Like, it was a spectacular failure. It was just, I wanted to know how long it took to clean a toilet and what products did you need to use, and let's itemize, like, is it 1 squirt, is it 2 squirts? Let's map that. Like, and they all,
Was
know.
it micromanaging that?
Oh,
felt you being
yeah,
micromanaged?
absolutely, yeah. And then I also realised that my teenage dreams of being a hotel manager were probably unfounded. Like, people would call me up at 2 a.m. They'd be like, we've run out of salt. I'd be like, stop doing tequila shots. It wasn't meant for me, that part of it. But yeah, you learn things as you grow up. And I've I didn't grow up and then get into business. I grew up in business. And so, you know, I freely admit I'm good mates with a staff member that used to work for us at Elephant Property, and she came to me numerous times and said, I'd really like more flexibility around school holidays. And I said, January is our busiest time. That's not going to happen, basically, before I became a mum. And she eventually left on good terms. You know, we're still mates today. And now I see her and I'm like, how did I not understand that you needed more flexibility around school time? Like, I didn't get it. I reckon I was probably a terrible boss to all parents before I actually became a parent.
Yeah, it's experience that makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit before about how you were involved in activities that were a little shady. So, like your birthday parties and all that sort of stuff. So, integrity in business, what's that mean to you? Like, you know.
As composed to there, yeah. I feel like that's something that probably took a real shift in my teenage years, and at some stage everybody learns about the truth and ethics. Well, hopefully everybody does. And so for me, we're just in the process of setting the vision for what we do with Up at the moment. We're still in startup phase ourselves. Like, we're 4 years in, we're experiencing 60% growth year on year. So it's a full on time, and we've got our next team meeting planned, and we're going to sit down and just draft up what our values are. And one of them that we talk about really often is that just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should. We only do things which we feel are in the client's best interests. And so just last night, 10:30 at night, I'm writing to a client and I gave them 3 options for how something could work. And I said, we could do it this way, I don't recommend it. We could do it this way and it's going to be a short-term fix, I don't recommend it, and here's why. Or we can do it this way and it's going to take you about a year and you'll miss the property that you want now, but it's going to put you in such a better position here, here, and here. If you want to go ahead with 1 or 2, I'm not the person to help you, but if you want to go on the long-term plan, let's work on it together. You know, and even sometimes people will come to us and want car loans for cars that we can get them loans for, but I'll sit down and talk to them about whether they necessarily need, you know, a car that costs the same amount as their annual salary times 2 and things like that. So it's something that I would much rather lose a client than do something that I can't sleep with well at night.
So honesty, you want to be honest, and
Absolutely.
that
And just looking at whatever is in the client's best interest. I mean, that's the good thing about our job. We sit in between the banks and the clients, and so we can fight for clients, but also I just have to make sure that even if something's possible, if it's not the right thing for them, I don't want to do it. I'd much rather lose that business every day of the week and just be honest with the person and say, here's why I don't think you should do it.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you look for then in employees? Because, you know, you obviously want that honesty and integrity. So when you're bringing people on board, how do you get that balance as well?
A business mentor many years ago said that A-class managers and team leaders always hire A-class people. B-class managers always look for C-class, like people below them, and people that aren't as good as them. And so I've always sort of held that true. I would much rather have a team completely composed of people that are 10 times better at what they do than me. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. If I am, I'm in the wrong room. So for example, there's a lady called Tamika Lynch who just came to work with us from ANZ, and Tamika's one of the people that I would go to when I didn't know how to do my job. And I would say, hey, I've got this really stupid question. Can I buy you a coffee and can you step me through it? And so she does commercial and business finance. It's something that is not my area of expertise, and she's amazing. So she's almost definitely the smartest person in every room that she's in, and now she works for us. So it's looking for people that are significantly brainier and fantastica than fantastica. It's not hard to be more fantastic than me if I'm using that word. But then also we would always hire on culture and attitude rather than necessarily someone who is just amazing at the job, especially because we have staff that work remotely, but our little team in Launceston as well, it's a great place to go to, and I don't want to stuff that up by putting the wrong person in there who's going to bring any sort of toxicity to that or any negative attitude, because it's just too fun to go to work to do that.
It sounds like you're very good at networking too, like you meet people and bring them on board. Is that true?
Not naturally, but I recognise that that's part of what I do. So one thing my parents always taught me really early on was that everything is sales. And so my kids know how to sell. It doesn't come naturally to either of them, but they have their own small business, and there's a number of people in the room that have bought products from them. And they started that business at 3 and 5, because everything is sales. Like, I'm a mortgage broker, so my job is to pair you up with the right home loan. But if I haven't sold you on me, I've got no clients to deal with. You know, Mel's an amazing photographer. That's her skill. But if she can't sell herself to the people that are going to then employ her, she's got no job. So I have no idea what the question was now, but
yeah, but it doesn't often meld the creative brain in that sort of way with business. Like there's often.
Yeah, and I'm naturally a massive introvert,
Yeah.
which people find really surprising. Like, I don't speak naturally in front of groups. I get extremely nervous. Like, I couldn't eat before speaking to you guys, even though I know half of you, because I might vomit. I might, you know, pass out. I passed out my first day of uni sitting around a circle, like on the floor here, where we had to go around in a circle and say our names and a little bit about where we were from. And by the time it got to me, zoop, straight back. Like, that's how naturally this comes to me. And the same, if I walk into a room like this, I was like, oh, there's Janie, I know her, thank goodness. And then it was like, oh, I know you, I know. And that was fine, but if you put me in a room full of strangers, I'll make myself go and talk to them because I know that it's good for me and good for my growth and good for my business, but it's not easy for me.
Yeah, but you do come across as confident, so...
It's all a facade.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that's so true. We were talking about sales before and you said everything's about sales, and then we just said, like, it doesn't always meld that, you know, people who are very creative with that business side of things, and they often
and
need
sales
managers.
is such a dirty word in Australia as well.
So what do you actually mean by everything is sales? Because selling yourself as a brand? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, take my last job as a real estate agent. We didn't sell houses. If you have a house for sale and it is priced well and marketed well, the house sells itself. If someone wants a 3-bedroom house in Youngtown, you aren't selling them a 2-bedroom house in Riverside. That's not happening. But when you go to get a listing, it's Roberts versus Harcourts versus Peter Lee's Real Estate, and it's the person sitting in front of another human being saying to them, trust me with your financial future. That's the sale. It's not the house, it's that. And in every business, there's that kind of interaction, whether it's an online pitch where you don't sit face to face with the client. But I feel like in Australia, there's 2 things that we're very, very bad at recognising, and one is that we're all salespeople in some sort of way, and 2 is that money is a really fundamental part of our lives, and none of us really like to talk about it very much. It's a very cultural thing where people don't talk about their interest rate or their mortgage or how much credit card debt they've got, or, you know, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think, what have your experiences been? The Barefoot Investor gets a really, really bad rap about what he's doing with mortgage brokers and financial planners, and I don't agree with everything that he says, but I love the fact that people are finally talking about money because of the books that he's putting out there. I think that's magnificent.
Well, that leads us to segue onto your books. So you've actually written a few books, haven't you?
I have.
What was the incentive? You just wanted to share that knowledge with people about how you'd, managed your own career and...
doesn't everyone want to write a book? Like,
yeah, that's true.
Really,
well, they say everyone's got a book in them.
Yeah, but like if I asked you guys, how many of you guys would say that you would like to write a book one day?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and it's just a goal that so many people have. And the first one, I've got some copies tonight, and we're donating all the money to charity if anyone wants some. We're doing half.
I noticed you don't have a Kindle version.
I can just email you a PDF version if you would like it. We can hook something up. I'm a bit low tech, and the books are a bit old as well. They're a little bit old now, but the first one came to me. I was doing a lot of public speaking after I sold my real estate agency, and
so even though you were scared of talking in public, you went and did public speaking.
Yeah, my first job was 1,200 real estate agents in Sydney, and it was 20 minutes. I watch it back, I was not bad actually, and then I got off the stage and passed out into someone's arms, like actually, like, and it came off as a hug, but it wasn't. I was out for a few seconds. So. But the books, the first one was co-written. So when I say co-written, it was written by someone else.
Like a ghostwriter?
And she really wanted to write it, and I was like, great, you can do that if you think there's much of a story.
Actually, I was going to say, was it ghostwritten? I thought, no, I won't ask that because you might take that as being a bit rude.
But not at all. And it says it on the front cover. So a lady called Lynn wrote the whole thing, and we've made no sort of bones about that because she was fantastic, and she interviewed everyone I'd ever met, like ex-boyfriends from primary school. She was really thorough. I was like, I don't know what they're going to say.
She built up a picture of you.
Yeah, and some of it, it was like the first draft, which is where I get to put the co-written in there, because the first draft, she'd spent a lot of time with my mum. So the first draft was like, Kirsty's very intelligent and very bright, and my word, she's pretty. Like, that's kind of how it was. And I was like, oh my God, my mum's had way too much influence on you. So we toned all of that back a bit. But The second one I wrote myself. After I sold my real estate agency, my husband was a firefighter at the time, and he had a week in Hobart, and I'd never had a week where I didn't have clients or work or anything like that. And we just went to a hotel room, and while he went and worked, I just wrote it in a week. So the second one's all me, typos, grammatical errors and all.
Yeah, and what that process for you enjoyed that creative process of putting it all down? And
Yeah, I enjoy writing, definitely, and I like being
you got
able
a blog,
to share.
but you haven't updated it for a while.
No, it's old, yeah. I had kids, and then blogging and all of that sort of stuff. Kids and a new business, yeah.
And you're very honest in your blog too, because you've got entries that say, I can't be bothered today, you know, like it's all a bit hard, and do you know what I mean? Then other days
Everyone
you're really
feels
up
like
and,
that though sometimes,
yeah, but
right?
it's, you know, very honest, and
yeah.
you know how you're feeling, and
Yeah, and that's the entrepreneurial sort of, you know, it's not linear at all. It looks like it from Instagram and Facebook and all the pretty pictures. It looks like it's like from success to success to success, and it's like success and chaos and success and what the hell am I doing with myself and why am I doing this? Like, and hopefully heading in an upward trajectory, but it's not linear at all. No, and there are days where even now, my job's stressful because I hold people's financial future in my hand, and I take that responsibility extremely seriously. And when we're pushing timeframes or when things aren't working quite right, I take that to bed with me at night. And sometimes I sit there going, why are you putting all this stress on yourself? And then 2 days later, I'm like, I just had a woman crying on the phone with me because she's 44 years old, and I just helped her buy her first home, and she never thought she would be able to do that. And this is the best job in the entire world. So again, it's like, it's up and down. It's a bipolar kind of environment to work in.
so how do you relax?
What's that?
Yeah.
I travel. Yeah, so I've structured my life so that I can spend a fair amount of the year working. And sometimes my clients will know when I'm working, and sometimes they won't because the actual service level doesn't drop to them at all. So I don't know how to turn off. I'm not very good at that. I don't usually check emails on Christmas Day because no one sends them to me. But every other day I'm working pretty much 7 days a week, round the clock. And that's a really deliberate choice at the moment. So my kids are young, they're 5 and 7, and I want to drop them off at school, which I do like 4 days a week. I have today, my 5-year-old, I'm with her until 3 o'clock every Thursday and Monday, and then I start work at 3 o'clock, and I'll work through until whenever it gets finished. I think I emailed you last night at some ridiculous hour, and I still have probably an hour and a half to go after that. Like, it's...
Do you think though there's more incentive to put in that kind of hard work when it is your own business? Like if you're working for somebody else, it's
I think I would
quite
probably
as
be
exciting.
terrible working for somebody else. I've been on my own, been a bit rogue for too long. I think it'd be hard to corral me back into normal work hours and normal holidays and all of those sorts of things. But I would like to think that I would put in that much effort for whatever job I was doing.
What advice would you give people who want to break away from the 9 to 5 and start their own business? Like what sort of skill set would you recommend?
I would recommend that they go and find someone who's tried the exact or a similar same thing as them and has failed, and have the conversation with that person. Definitely as well, like I get a lot of people that come to me and want to open shops. That seems to be the thing at the moment. I want to open a boutique, I want to open a shop. And I'm like, great, go and talk to someone who's done really, really well at that. But then go and talk to, you know, I've got numerous clients who've tried to open shops and it hasn't worked out for them. You know, go and find someone like that and find out what went wrong, what they would tell themselves if they could go back to the beginning. But that's always my biggest piece of advice. Go and find somebody else who's done it. Like the first thing I did when we wanted to go into broking was I went and found a broker who was no longer broking and said, what did you love? What did you hate? What can you tell me? And we actually ended up buying his trail book because again I can't shut my brain off. So but it was super informative, and a lot of the decisions we made were based around what didn't work for him.
It's hard though for people, isn't it, to pick themselves up from failure too. Like perhaps it would have done better if they'd done something differently, but it's really hard sometimes to keep going. What would you say to those people? Like, is it never give up, or do you get to a point where you should give up and say, right, this just isn't going to work, like I've spent 10 years of my life doing this and it's not getting anywhere? Like, do you feel like there's that adage, never give up, but do you think you should give up sometimes?
Yeah, I don't really believe in never give up. I just believe about making a really strategic decision about what kind of life you want to lead, and if you're heading towards that direction, great, and if you're not, you need to change things. And whether it's giving up or pivoting or, I feel like there's definitely times to let things go, you know, and I feel like, again, it's really easy to look at the highlights reel and go, oh, well, she's had this amazingly successful real estate agency and then another one that was really successful and now a mortgage broking business. But you don't see, I tried to start an online training company that failed spectacularly and, you know, cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and because I'm not posting about that one on Instagram, you know. So, but the most successful people I find try a lot of stuff and fail at a lot of things. And there's a saying, fail forward. Like if you can just learn from that, pick yourself up and move on. It's the same way, like, you know, if I was back to my 15 or 16-year-old self and I had let what I had seen my parents go through define me, but I didn't, I let it educate me. And so, yeah, I've never been that afraid of failure. I think a good tip for that is if you have a really good backup plan. So when we started my real estate agency when I was 21 years old, my backup plan, if it didn't work out, was that I was going to go back and like sell ice creams or do whatever I had to do and get enough money to go backpacking through Europe. And it's like, that was not a terrible backup plan at all. I was quite excited about that backup plan. So if it didn't work out, it was all going to be okay. And I'm not the kind of person who would risk everything. I'm a fairly conservative person by nature. So yeah, I would think if you go into something without putting everything on the line, then again, you've got a bit of a safety net there.
You were talking before about education and your training company. What for you was some of the best educational experience, both formal and informal?
I've got a mentor who adopted me probably 15 years ago. He's a real estate agent, and we brought him out to speak a couple of years ago here for an event that we put on each year. And every time I hang around him, my business improves because I just watch what he does. So he's the kind of person where we'll go and have dinner at a restaurant, and while we're sitting in the restaurant, he'll have written an email off to the manager to compliment the waiter on their amazing service. And he, when we met, the first time we met, we were speaking at the same event, and then we flew home on the same flight. And when we checked in for the flight, he, well before the days of Facebook, he said, "Can I have a look at your driver's license?" And he went, "Chunk," gave it back to me. And then every year for the past 15 years or however long we've been friends, he sends me something on my birthday. Like every year. When I was pregnant with my first child, I got a gift every week from him the entire pregnancy as soon as he knew about it. Little things like nail clippers and Carlton socks. He's a mad Carlton football fan.
Because that could veer into creepy, actually. Someone
yeah,
giving you
if he
every
wasn't
week,
so sweet,
like,
absolutely, yeah. But so it's just, a lot of it's been the personal mentors that I've had. And learning from people and seeing that quite often the most successful people are also the most generous with their time. And I feel like if you're respectful of how you interact with them, people are really, really willing to share all their secrets.
Yeah, most
people
will,
there
won't
are no
they?
secrets.
Yeah,
That's the thing, you know. And if I meet someone who's really, really guarded, they're probably not the person for me to hang out with, because I'm pretty much an open book. Like when we were talking, we did a Skype interview, and these guys were like, you know, is there anything we should not ask about or whatever? I'm like, whatever you want. Like, you're not going to be able to bring up something except the ghostwriting, but you're not going to be able to bring up something that I won't answer.
Yeah, mentoring is really interesting. Actually, I often ask these people about mentoring, and I always am really interested to know if women mentor differently than men mentor. Have you ever noticed a difference in
I've had
that?
far more male mentors than I have had women, and perhaps it's the industries that I've worked in. I'm really lucky to have a really good... Okay, I'll step back a bit. When I was in my teen years and in my early 20s, I was predominantly friends with men, and I had this idea that I was really intimidating to women and I could probably never be friends with them. And my partner at the time was like, you got to stop this. Like, you can't just only be friends with men. You know, it's going to be so important for you to have female friends. And also, I think he would have liked it if I wasn't just friends with all these young guys. And so I set myself a goal. I wrote it down, and I said, I'm going to become friends with women. And it's going to be awesome, and my whole life's going to change. And then I started becoming friends with women, and you know, there's a couple of them in the room here today that I became friends with over the next couple of years. They're all a little bit older than me. Many of them have been self-employed in some kind of ways. They're all fabulously inspiring, and so they're not formal mentors, they're my friends, but I learned so much from them, definitely. So yeah, while there hasn't been like a specific female business mentor, I learned from all of them a lot.
And you mentor others?
Nothing formally. Like sometimes people come to me and they're like, I really like you to coach me. And that word doesn't really, it doesn't sort of make me go, yes, I want to coach you, because I don't want to do anything that I can't do properly. But if someone wants to have a cup of coffee and ask me some questions, there may or may not be someone in the room that came to me and said, can we have a cup of coffee? And she brought 30 questions along, and we went through every single one of them. And I just thought, that's fantastic. Like, how well prepared is she? And so that was amazing. Like, I've been given time by so many people that I will always give that time back. Yeah. Or something like this, you know, if someone says, do you want to come and speak? And I haven't spoken in Launceston for 10 years because I'm afraid, I have to say yes. Yeah.
Well, I noticed you're quite philanthropic too on your, you know, social media about the things that you're doing. So you're generous with your time and generous with things that you do. And it's important to you to support others. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's really leads on to community. Like, obviously Launceston's a small community. It seems to have been important for you to stay in this community and keep your business in this community rather than, say, go to Melbourne or Sydney. And
yeah, I mean, I might have been more tempted to go. I did. I moved to Melbourne for uni straight after I finished high school, and definitely did that whole thing. I've got to be in a big city. I've got to be in a big city. And then I married a Tasmanian boy who will never live outside of Tasmania, and had 2 beautiful kids with him. And so I will always live here because, you know, we're Tasmanians. Like, where else would you want to raise kids? So that's really great. And then I just fluctuate by travelling an awful lot and still seeing the world. Like, that's what keeps me safe and grounded. But it's an amazing community. You know, like I said, I feel like the support that I got, especially in my real estate days, but even now, like, we've just opened a new office up on Brisbane Street. People I don't know are just popping their heads in and going, it looks fantastic, you know, like, well done. So yeah, it's a beautiful place, especially now that I've got young kids. Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, you're opening businesses and employing people, but in a lot of ways, traditional businesses are dying as well. So how do you see going forward for business? Like, so there's so much digital disruption, there's robots, AI, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it will impact
It's huge in our industry as well. Yeah,
exactly. How do you see the future of employment? And
I feel like the only way we can really recession-proof our business, not only against that, but also if you don't come and use us as mortgage brokers in Launceston, there are fantastic other options. Like, I'm the first one to say that. It's a really close-knit industry, and there are a lot of people who are very, very good at their job. The only real difference we can offer, I mean, we might have slightly different lenders, but the only real difference we can offer is what it's like to sit down face-to-face to me and then have me managing that deal right through, and then the after-sale service. So a robot's never going to be able to do that. A robot's never going to be able to crack a joke and remember your kid's name and, you know, have a laugh with you. And I send people stupid text messages on their birthday and things like that. Like, we try and inject as much personality into our business. And that's something even right back through every business I've had. I've always wanted the tone of all our communications to be friendly, not professional. I don't want to be stuffy. Even when I'm 79, I'm still going to think that I'm like the young person in business, and I'm going to want the tone of our communication to come across like that. Like, I want it to sound like I'm your friend and I care about you, because if you are my client, I'm your friend and I care about you. So, yeah.
So you don't see business being taken over by
the
robots
industry
yet?
will change.
Yeah.
It will absolutely change. But I hope that we can use technology better to make our lives easier in that. But I still feel like there's always going to be a marketplace for someone that wants to sit down in front of a person. Like, a lot of the business we get, for a while there, one of the major banks in town was having people sit down in front of a camera, and they didn't have a lender, and so they were doing Skype interviews. And we had clients coming to us in droves because they didn't want that. They wanted to sit down in front of a person. And so, yeah, I feel like there'll be changes, and you've got to be prepared for that. But you can only do what you can do. I can't change the direction. I can only adapt to it as it's happening. And I mean, there's been so many changes in our industry even since we started 4 years ago that, yeah, if you don't like change, you shouldn't be in the mortgage broking industry.
Yeah. So where do you see it going? Where do you see yourself in the next, 5 or 10 years, or 5 years? We'll start with 5, because you've got kids and
yeah. We don't have any desires to be like the next big franchise all across the country. I did when I started out, because I have this tendency to not be able to think small, but we have a really cool team. There's 4 of us that work in our Launceston office. There's 2 other people that work remotely with kids who are in Lonnie, and then we have 1 in Queensland, 1 in South Australia, and then 2 in the Philippines. So we're sort of embracing a bit of offshoring, but they're part of our team as well. And so I'd like to see a couple more lenders on our team, just so that I can get to bed a little bit earlier at night, because the 1 a.m. finishes are a bit tough when they're 6 or 7 days a week. But I don't think we're going to be huge. I just want to see us really refining our systems, making the service that we provide a lot more procedural so that it gets done every time without fail. Like, that's probably my strength in a business. It's being able to look at a really personal experience and break it down so that that stuff happens regardless of who is on that file.
So it seems to me, though, success kind of breeds success. So the fact that you've had this success almost guarantees some small success. Yeah.
No,
I know you've had your failures along the way, but you've also had a lot of success. So it's almost like
I just probably stick longer at the ones that are succeeding.
Yeah.
I would tend to exit a failure pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I feel like the stuff that's been successful for me is all in the same wheelhouse. It's selling what's in my brain, not a physical product. I don't do very well with physical products. They just don't seem to gel that well with me. Maybe it's because I'm a wannabe minimalist.
I was about to ask you about minimalism. What's your view on minimalism?
I would love to be a minimalist, but I've got too much crap in my house, basically. I have kids, so my kids are at that age where it's like, don't throw that out, we can recycle that, we can use that, we can craft with that. We can craft with that is basically the motto in our house. So I'm looking forward to moving house soon, just so that I can basically purge everything and throw it all out. And yeah, I'd much rather have fewer things, but that's something that I'm coming to later in life. When I was in my early 20s, I wanted to have all the shoes, all of them. Yeah.
You've still got the shoes, or are they?
Still got them. The kids, mosey around with them. My ankles won't support high heels anymore, so they're all wasted. There's hundreds of pairs of them, and I just look at them now and I'm like, what were you even thinking?
Imelda Marcos, remember her? With
exactly.
all the shoes. So just, if you could leave people here with a quote or a tip for success, is there any one thing that you would recommend? Like any?
There's a quote that it's a quote that someone in the room here and I are getting tattooed on ourselves. No, just joking. But I love it, and I heard it many years ago. It's a Latin phrase, and it's memento vivere, and it means remember to live. And I feel like so many people go through life existing and not trying to actually live. Like there's not real intention around what they're doing with their days. They're not heading in a direction. And even if that direction is just, I want to be the most present parent that I possibly can be, and I want to get to every sports match this year or something like that, but just something that makes your heart sing. And so for me, it's trying to figure out the 3 key areas of my life are my kids, work and travel. And I identified that a really long time ago, and I was like, I need those 3 things to be working, and then I'm a happy person. And so my whole thing is about, you don't need to do it as structured as me. Like, I've got lists and things to tick off every day towards them. But
how long are your lists?
There's a lot of lists. Yeah.
12 things a day? Do you have a set list? Like you say, right, there's 12 things, or do you some days you think, no, it's 15 on this list?
Yeah, I reckon there's probably about 40 sitting there, and I'll just get through as many as I can get through today, and then the rest of them get moved to tomorrow or the weekend.
Have you ever never completed a list?
Like, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's impossible. It's impossible to complete my lists. Yeah, but I just feel like life is too short and too precious not to be striving for whatever makes your heart sing. And if it is all the shoes, great, all the shoes. But it's different for everyone. And I know there's some real travel fanatics in the room, and that might be what it is for them. And I know there's people that are really working hard on new business ventures and those sorts of things. But just about figuring out what makes you tick and doing more of that. I mean, there's a meme going around, and it's like, write down a list of all the stuff you love, and then write down all the stuff you do in a day. And like, if the 2 lists don't have a lot of overlap, there's a problem with it. So yeah, that would probably be it. It's not very succinct, not very quote worthy, but
something you were saying too that I noticed when you were saying that you should go for your goals and all that sort of stuff. And what would you say though to people who are a lot older and they don't have much money, and maybe they've lost their job, and like, what sort of steps and advice would you give? Because quite a few of them are doing startups. Like, I was reading somewhere that a lot of middle-aged people are now doing startups because
awesome.
They may have lost their jobs, or they just decided they're sick of their jobs.
Yeah.
In some ways, there's a greater element of risk because they're a lot older.
I feel like the greater element of risk comes with what you have to lose. Like, I was so fortunate to start my first real legitimate business at 21 with no kids, no debt, no mortgage. I didn't have any of the things that would be terrifying to me if I was doing it now. And